Stark Varg review. Now you guys know I call a spade a spade. Even if it doesn't identify as a spade, I'll still call it a spade. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I don't know why not. It's bloody fantastic, but I've been under constant attack by a certain community for doing just this, calling a spade a spade. But to establish credibility here and give a little bit of context before I get into the review of the Stark Varg, I believe I am the last rider to ever win an Australian Supercross Championship on a two-stroke machine. Back in 2012. Before that, it was Chad Reed. I own two two-strokes right now. I've got a YZ85, a YZ250. I've got 4 strokes since age 5 till 25. I ride 5 days a week, every single week on gas-powered machines. I live for them. I love them. I still ride them. The next time I ride will be on one. But today, I had the opportunity to ride a Stark Varg. It was completely unplanned, completely unscripted. A bloke said, hey, do you want to have a ride? I said, why not? I love motorbikes. I'll give it a go. And that was 5 hours ago. I've just gotten home. I'm sitting down here now filming this video and I've just felt compelled to give my analysis on the bloody thing because I read a few reviews and I watched a few videos, but they come from the typical journalist analytical mind where they explain the new features and the new buttons and how much it weighs and what it looks like, this, that and the other. The shit no one really cares about. What you want to know is how does it ride? What is it like? Is it better? Is it worse? And I'm going to give you guys that. I've got a long detailed history testing bikes, riding bikes all over the gaff, this, that and the other. And I've got to say, it's fucking incredible. It blew my mind. That is just the honest opinion. I know you're going to be in the comments going, oh, electric bike, this and that. But guys, it was fucking awesome. I loved it. If we're just talking pure enjoyment on the motorcycle whilst riding the track, fantastic. And I'm going to get into it. I'm going to tell you guys why. Now, I did not expect this. I did not know. I've never ridden an electric bike before. I really had no idea. And I'm going to break it down why it was so good. And number one is inertia. Now, in one of the reviews that I read by a bike review journalist type person, they kept saying how the bike weighs more, which I believe it does if you put it on a scale. It might weigh 20 pounds more. When you ride it, I'll say it right here, you would think it weighs half the amount of a gas-powered machine, half the amount. And the reason why is inertia. Now, we've got to get into the technical side of a motorcycle here. But if you have two motorbikes, gas-powered motorbikes, and they weigh exactly the same amount, yet one's a 125cc and one's a 450cc, yet they both weigh, let's say 100 kilos exactly, the 450 will feel like it weighs double than the 125. And the reason why is inertia. Now, inertia is the force moving forwards on a motorcycle. Now, inside of our engine, we have the clutch, the piston, the crank, the gearbox, all these sorts of things, and they're all moving in a forwards facing direction because that's the way the motorbike is going. As well as that, we have our wheels that are going that way. And all the forces of the machine are setting us forward. Now, think of this as if you are on a roller coaster and it's going along nice and smooth, it's pretty good, and all of a sudden it stops. You'd go flying out the front. That is inertia, right? On a motorcycle, we have constant inertia. Now, what sucks about inertia is imagine holding an angle grinder or like a demo saw, something with a big spinning blade at the front, and then rev it up and try and rotate it. It's very, very difficult because you've got all that force going that way, and here you are trying to steer it and turn the angle of it. It gets very, very difficult, and the reason why is the forward-facing inertia. Now, this is the biggest issue on motorcycles in regards to handling. It has the most impact on a motorcycle, right? On an electric bike, you guessed it. This is gone. There is no inertia. There is none. There is just a battery. There is no forward spinning mechanical motor in there. And to give you an idea about how important inertia is, on MotoGP bikes, right, the very, very top factory bikes, they actually turn the engine around. They rotate it so it spins backwards, right? The crank will spin backwards, the clutch will spin backwards, the gearbox will spin backwards. And what they do is they chuck another little motor here to then reverse it around the other way so the chain spins the right direction and turns the wheel forwards. Now, the reason they reverse the motor is to neutralize the force, the forward inertia from the wheels. This one goes backwards, these ones go forwards, and it equals out. So then what it does is it makes it feel like a BMX bike or a mountain bike, so nimble and so light, it neutralizes the forces. Now, this is incredibly expensive to do, so no production bike ever in the history of the world has ever had a backwards facing engine like this, like the MotoGP bikes, right? They literally just do it for the top tier, top races to help with their performance. Now, on an electric bike, this is literally gone. There is no inertia. Now, why is this so important? is because when you ride the damn thing, it feels like it weighs 20 kilos. It's light as a feather. Whether you want to lean it over into a corner, whip it on a jump, hit some bumps, whatever it is. Let's say you've got a motorcycle, 450cc with a heavy inertia engine. The range for perfect is in here, right? When you lean your bike over, whether you lean it over too far or not enough, the window is very, very small between good and bad. Out here is bad, in here is good. This is the window. On a motorcycle with no inertia, so just a BMX bike or something, or like, let's say a 125 compared to a 450, the window is out here. Now, anywhere in here is good. Out here is bad. Because that inertia is gone, you can make so many mistakes and get away with it. You can almost just throw it into a corner and it's all good. Same thing on the jumps, whatever it is. So this is really, really beneficial, and that's the reason why it feels so light. As well as that, bumps. We're gonna get into the handling in a bit. I'm gonna break that down. But if you have a bump here and you're coming at it on your motorcycle and you hit it, boom, your bike is gonna kick forwards on the bump, right? It's gonna kick forwards. And as it kicks forwards, well, the wheels are rotating forwards and the inertia is rotating forwards and the back wheel's going forwards, and now you're slowing down and now you've got the engine brake, all the forces are going like this, and then you kick the bum up, boom. What sucks about bumps? Getting kicked up in the arse. On an electric bike, that doesn't happen either because there is no engine brake. That inertia is gone. It literally will just coast over it. It's just two wheels, free rolling over a bump. There is not that uplifting, slowing inertia, kicking force. So the handling on it is incredible as well. So that was about the engine, but more so affects the handling via the laws of inertia. The most impressive thing I'm gonna say was the throttle response and power. And the reason for this is very, very clear. I'm gonna explain it to you here. On a gas-powered machine, we have our throttle, right? We twist the throttle goes on a cable, it goes all around the place, around the bike, and it comes down here to a carby slide. Now the carby slide has to open, fuel will come in this way, air will come in this way, it will push that into a piston, the piston lights on fire, the piston turns the crank turns the gearbox and the clutch, and that turns the sprocket, which then turns the rear wheel, right? So you twist your throttle, goes all the way from here until you get traction, right? Until the wheel actually spins and gives you what you want, forwards facing momentum. On an electric bike, they have this thing called a fly-by-wire or live-by-wire, something like that. The terms don't matter, the fact is it's fucking good. Throttle on the electric bike, there is no cable, it's electric, right? It senses when the throttle turns, and literally from there, the throttle turns, it goes to the wheel, that's it. There's a battery pack along here, and what it will do is it will send positive and negative neurons together, and just like two magnets, they don't want to touch, so then they'll spin and they'll create a little bit of force. These are very, very small. These will turn, it goes straight into the drivetrain, off it goes. That is it. There is none of this process. It literally goes from hand to wheel with a very small electrical process taking place in the middle. Now, to think of this, to compare this, as quickly as you can light up your phone screen, or as quickly as you can turn that light switch on and off, that is as quick as that throttle will get power to the rear wheel. It is instant. There is none of the muck, none of the clutter in the middle. You turn the throttle, it sends a sensor to the wheel, and it moves. That is it. It's so quick. Now, because of this, the bike I rode, I believe, was a 70 horsepower Stark Varg. He gave it to me on map 3 of 5. I think map 3 is like 40 horsepower or 30 horsepower. Because of the throttle responsiveness, 30 feels like 60. I mean that, guys. I've ridden my entire life, right? I know what I'm talking about. 30 horsepower on a Stark feels like 60. I put the thing in level 4, I put the thing in level 5, it was too quick. And it was too quick because it was too responsive, right? There is none of this lag in the middle. It's instant to the back wheel. So you have to have really, really, really good throttle control. And to be honest with you, like, it almost doubles the power via the efficiency of the throttle. Okay, so you can ride it on that 30 horsepower mode and you can go extremely quick. I'll say quicker than the 450F, honestly, I mean that. On the setting 3, you would go quicker than a 450F on a Stark Varg purely because of the fly-by-wire, whatever the bloody hell it's called, throttle setup rather than the cable, slide, carby, all that bullshit, right? So that was absolutely incredible. I mean, the power on it is just next world, next level. It is sensational. Right, so we covered the inertia, that was a positive. We covered the throttle response, that is a positive. Now we'll talk about the suspension. Now the suspension setup, mechanically, it's basically the same as a gas production bike, and that's how it felt. I really didn't notice too much in the way of suspension, as far as the way it compressed, it rebounded, it loaded, all these sorts of things. It just felt normal. It felt really, really good. Where it was fantastic was in the bumps, But it was fantastic in the bumps due to the lack of inertia in the engine, so the lack of engine braking. It would just coast and float over them. So I would not put that down to suspension. But from everything I could tell, it would seem the window of perfection on an electric bike for suspension is much wider than, say, the average 450 or whatever machine. And the reason for that is again down to that inertia. Right? You're not having to correct so many forces and get them all aligned perfectly. The weight, the balance, the forwards, the backwards, all these sorts of things, and get them into this narrow little window where it feels good. On an electric bike, that window is much, much bigger because there's a lot less forces at play. It's just a throttle, a wheel, zero inertia, zero engine brake, just rolling wheels. And that is fantastic. So suspension wise, I really don't have too much there to say. It just seems like a normal conventional bike. You could click it harder, you could click it softer, you could do whatever you want to do. I'm sure anybody could get it set up for them amazing. I have no idea what setting this bike had in it, but I'm just gonna say it, due to the lack of inertia and engine braking, it felt better than my 450F, which is just in stock trim. It wasn't set up for me, but it was in absolutely no way a negative. I just say neutral, right? I wouldn't say it handles bumps better, as in the actual suspension itself, other than the lack of inertia made it feel very, very good. Now, next, chassis. This one was a little bit of a negative. I'm gonna say a little bit of a negative, and I mean slightly, maybe just like 10% worse. And the only reason why is probably personal preference for me. I prefer quite a rigid machine, right? I like to run them in for say 2 hours, the frame will loosen up just a little bit, maybe 5%, and then from 2 to 10 hours, I find they're perfect, right? The rigidity of the frame, I like them to be very stiff, so you can hop and bounce and skip, and you can really get the feedback from the track, so you can use the track to your advantage to hop and skip and bounce over jumps. This is what I like. As well as that, you can also get more power out of a motorcycle when the frame is a lot more rigid, because you can push them into the ground, and less of the energy will be dispersed through the flex of the frame, and it will just go forwards. Kind of like riding a road cycle with a very rigid, stiff frame versus a mountain bike, which compresses. The mountain bike sucks. You can't go very quick on them because that pedaling energy goes into the suspension, up and down. Whereas a road cycle, stiff as, they just go forwards because the energy is literally just going into the wheel and onwards. Now that's how I like my motorcycles, the Stark. The frame is different. So on a conventional motorcycle, you have your head stem, the engine cradle, swing arm pivot, up to the seat, back along to the head stem. It's a solid frame, right? It's one unit, and then you slide the motor into here. So the motor is one part, the frame is another. On the Stark, it's different. You have your head stem, you have your top tube, it comes down to the swing arm, and that is it. This part here, on the Stark, is actually the battery, right? So the battery makes up a part of the frame. They are both like the same thing. And because of that, it doesn't have solid tubing down here into here. It does have a bit of a frame gusset, I guess, that goes from here to the center. I'm not sure exactly what it connected onto. It was just, looked like a small, sort of not a very stiff, rigid bar. And that was it. So because of that, because it is missing this bar through here, and it has a battery instead, the bike would flex a lot in the center. At least that's how it felt to me. So when you would land off jumps, it would feel very dead, very soft. When you would try and push it through the bumps and whatnot and try to hop and skip, it didn't have that rigidity there to really pop and skip bumps. But that's more of a personal thing for me. There are a lot of people that love a very compliant frame, something that has a lot of flex, so it's very subtle and it complies to the ground. That's not personally for me. So either way, that was just one thing that I noticed, I will say, and it's definitely due to the way that the frame is designed. But again, I'm not gonna say a net positive or a net negative, pretty well neutral. Felt good, not too bad. The brakes, this one was a little bit different for me. I only rode it for 20 minutes, guys, that's it. I'll call a spade a spade. I rode it for 20 minutes, and on typical corners where you brake in, straight line, do your turn, out you go, fine. On sweeping turns, it was fine. The only time I had an issue was when I was using the rear brake to turn the motorcycle. So if I came into a berm, grab the rear brake coming in, lock it up, try to slide it around the turn and pick it up with the throttle, I did find that difficult. Why that is, I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to assume maybe the engine brake slowing up the machine, crossed over with the back brake into the throttle. It's a bit of a smoother process rather than actually locking the brake, twisting the throttle. That seems like it'd be much more of a sort of a rigid crossover between the two of them. And that I did struggle with. I couldn't really slide the back wheel up into turns and around, but this is maybe 2 or 3 turns on a motocross track, and I only rode it for 20 minutes. So maybe with time that would have got better, but to me that was a negative, having the rear brake up on the bars. But as far as the front brake, it was fantastic. As far as braking down hills and in straight line or over braking bumps, way better having the handbrake for sure, and I'll explain why again. Our technique on a motorcycle is from the feet up. If your feet aren't correct, everything else will falter. Now, everything else can look good, but unless your weight is going into your feet correctly, so then your knees can be strong and your hips can be strong and your shoulder and your neck can be strong, then you're basically just doing it to look good, right? Our feet must have firm and proper contact with the motorcycle, and our body is stacked on top of that, and the strength of our structure depends on the weight of our feet, right? On a Stark, there's no gears, there's no back brake lever. So you literally lock your feet in and that's it, right? So to have correct technique on a Stark is much, much easier. It's very, very simple. It's probably the most detrimental factor to good technique is incorrect feet, and incorrect feet come from having trouble with gears and back brake. You're constantly forwards, back, in, out, up, down, this, that, the other. You hit the back brake, your knee comes forward, you click up gears, your foot moves off the right position, right? It basically fucks everything to make it simple. Whereas when you're on the Stark, there's none of that. You can literally just lock your feet on, that's it. And even so in the corners, because it has that lack of inertia, which makes it very, very easy to turn, you almost don't need to put your leg out in many corners. Like I'd just compare it to a road cycle or a BMX bike or anything like that. You don't put your leg out in the turns. And that's sort of basically how it felt on the Stark. I would imagine if you rode it for say 6 months to a year, you would stop putting your foot out in turns unless you literally had to get it up out of the way. So that was very, very beneficial. But I'm gonna say for performance, I don't know if I like the back brake on the hand controls. Particularly on a track where you need to slide the back wheel around a little bit to turn. But again, I only rode it for 20 minutes, so I'm not too sure. That was just one thing that really stood out to me. And look, that's it guys. That's basically everything that I could say from the Stark. As far as all the other shit goes, the buttons, the lights, this, that, and the other, I don't really care about that. I just like to know how it feels, what it rides like. And look, I'm gonna be honest, I think in 10 years time, at least 60% of bikes are electric, and in 20 years time, 100% of bikes are electric. And I'm gonna explain why I believe that is. If you had a caveman back in the day, right? And he was trying to cut up his steak, or whatever they used to have. And all they had was a rock, right? They had a really sharp rock, and they used to just bash the steak with the rock and cut it in half that way, right? That would seem like the best way to cut open the steak. I mean, it's better than using a stick or a leaf or anything else. The rock is the best thing. It's the sharpest tool that they had. And then somebody comes along and they go, here's a knife. And they use the knife and it cuts it much nicer. It's much cleaner. It's much more simple. It's easier to use. Now the cavemen will probably still prefer the rock through habit and comfort. It's what you've always used. You like your rock. I have a favorite rock. I'm going to use my rock. It's nostalgic. I have an attachment to the rock. But the knife is logically better. It's a better experience. It performs better. Now the reason I bring this up is that the kids born today, or even born 5 years ago, that are getting on these Stasics, they're going to go, why in the hell would I ever ride this gas-powered machine? Why would I ever go back to the caveman technology, right? Because it is clearly not as good performance-wise, I'm just calling a spade, as the electric bike. And so over time, those kids will have to buy bikes, and that's what they will go with. They will not take a step backward and buy the old traditional caveman rock. They will go with the nice new technology because it is logically better. But this process will take 10 to 20 years time, right? That's how long it will take to phase out. The average car has a lifespan of 25 years. I'm sure a motorbike is probably the same. Throw them in the bin, get a new one, right? That's when you can't replace them anymore. At some point, people will stop replacing their gas-powered machines and they will just buy the electric ones. At some point, kids that have only ever ridden electric bikes won't want to go to something that has subpar performance compared to it. And that's just the way it is. So I'm just saying in 20 years time, 100% of bikes will be electric. Now this is just in regards to riding the motorcycle. You're just a fan of the sport, you just love riding motorbikes, you love the feeling it gives you love the adrenaline, you love the challenge, and you love to do it on the most comfortable, best performing, fastest machine you can. That's the electric bike. Now in terms of racing, I mean, it'll take a while. You know, it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years, something like that before it'll convert, if it even ever does in racing. But I'm just saying for the average bloke going to ride parks on the weekend, the dad, the kids, whatever it is, I can't see a reality where the electric bike doesn't take over at some point. Racing will be different. I don't think it will ever leave gas-powered machines in racing. There's so much performance behind them. There's so much nostalgia and everything like that. But in saying that, the two-strokes disappeared at some point too, didn't they? So, look, I know everyone's probably going to be in the comments going, electric bikes this, electric bikes that. Guys, I just call a spade, that's it. Nobody loves the burn dead dinosaurs more than me. I own a Mustang and I own two-strokes. I love booting the gas, right? But I've got to call it how it is. From a technical aspect and a rider's point of view, it is much nicer and much easier to ride the Stark Do I think people will be racing them? No. Do I think they will replace the gas-powered machine in 20 years' time at ride parks and ride days? Yes. And that's my opinion. I want to hear yours. The question is, in 20 years' time, what percentage of bikes at a ride park at an average ride day will be electric? That's my question to you guys. Let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoy this, and any feedback, I'd really, really appreciate it. Cheers guys, have a great one.